Hello everybody and welcome to week 1 of the Sirdar Easter Egg Crochet Along. My name is Lindsey from Lottie and Albert and I'm the designer of the blanket. If you have done a couple of the other Sirdar Crochet Alongs, you may have seen me before. I did the Blossom and Buds spring blanket and I also designed the gingerbread Christmas blanket. I have talked a little bit more about my design process and the inspiration for the blanket in our introduction. So if you want to go back and watch that one, then please do. And you can find out a little bit more about me and a little bit more about the blanket. But for today, I'm going to be introducing you to week 1. So if you've not yet got your official yarn pack, that's what you're going to need before we get started and we delve into making our beautiful center of our blanket. The official yarn pack has got 15 different balls of yarn in it, all the colours you're going to need to make the blanket. You'll also find a few extras in there like your yarn needle and some stitch markers and a little pom-pom maker that we're going to be needing for our blanket. You can pick up your yarn pack from any of your favourite participating stockists or you can grab one on Sirdar.com. The other thing that you'll definitely need to do is to sign up to receive the patterns at Sirdar.com. Even if you've done one of the blankets before or even if you've done one of my crochet alongs before, each new blanket is its own setup. So make sure you sign up for the Easter egg blanket emails and then we can get started together. In week 1, we are going to be starting right at the middle of our blanket, which I think is just a lovely way to begin. We're going to start with a really impactful center. It's also super cute. And we get to use a couple of different colors to begin with. I think that builds it really nicely. And I always think it's nice to finish up week 1 with something that looks quite pretty and exciting and has got lots of colors in it, because that's what this blanket is really all about. So we're going to be using a couple of different techniques, and of course I'm going to take you through those step by step as we crochet along together. But we're using an intarsia technique for our bunny, so we'll talk about how to change colour, how to create our fun egg shape right in the middle, and then how to turn that egg shape into a rectangle before adding some wavy stitches. So we're doing a combination for those. Some of them are crocheted in the round, and then we've got a little bit of a surface crochet technique that goes on there as well. So we've thrown some real Easter treats into week 1 right from the start. We're sampling a few different techniques and stitches. If you are more of a beginner, or if you're at this stage and you're wondering if the crochet along is for you, then it definitely is. The step-by-step videos I'm going to work with you through really hold your hand. But also, if you're familiar with videos but you've not really grown yet to reading a pattern, as I work through the video with you, I'll also help you with reading the pattern and show you what it is we're trying to achieve and working through all those skills and techniques together. So I think these crochet alongs are a really lovely way to help you move just from videos to patterns as well, because we do both at the same time, and I'll show you how we work together with those. So make sure that you've got your pattern alongside. We'll start really slowly if you are more of a beginner in week 1, building on those skills as we go, but you're going to need to refer to the video and the pattern as we work through together. Alongside your official yarn pack, you will of course also need a 4mm crochet hook. This is the hook size we're recommending for this project, and with working with our DK weight yarn. It's got a really lovely ergonomic squishy handle, and again, this is one of my biggest tips if you are more of a beginner and you're embarking on a project like this. You just want yourself a comfy hook that is going to fit really nicely and see you through this lovely project. So with your hook at the ready, let's get started together on week 1 and dive into our Easter basket of treats. The first thing we're going to need to get started on week 1 is 2 of our colours. We want our pink bonus DK and our Aran, and you'll also need a 4mm hook. For the pink yarn, we're going to want to do something just to get prepared before we start, which is to split our large ball into 2 separate balls. Now, what we've recommended in the pattern is to take off around 1/4 of the ball. So if we're being precise, that's 70 meters or 25 grams. You can do that by measuring it out if you want to be exact. So find your yarn end, mark yourself out 1 meter on a table or in front of you, and then measure it out. Or if we want to do it more by weight, you can almost sort of peel off a section of your yarn and just check. Essentially, we just want 1 separate ball because of the way we're going to work and the technique that we are using. So once you have prepped your yarn, we're going to be starting just with the pink. And for this stage of the video, I'm going to go really slowly, show you how I hold my yarn, how to create a slip knot on your hook, and how to chain. Now, some of you may already be more experienced with that, but just for those who need a little bit more information, we are going to start really slowly in this part of the video. So to create a slip knot on your hook, I'll show you the method that I like to use. There are obviously different ways of doing it, so if you've already got a method that you're comfortable with, please feel free to do it that way. You don't have to copy my method exactly. But what I like to do is to hold the yarn between my thumb and my fingers on my non-dominant hand, and you want to leave yourself a little bit of a tail end here. So you don't want to be holding the yarn right at the end. Instead, just leave yourself a little bit of a tail end. When we come to weave in our ends later on, it just helps if you've got a little bit of length to thread onto a needle. So holding your yarn between your thumb and fingers, wrap it round your fingers once and then cross over. I then like to just use this finger to anchor it. So I've sort of got it crossed over here and then running parallel on the tops of my fingers. Then using your hook, you can slide it under the first loop and grab the second loop and pull through. We've then formed a little knot, but obviously it's quite loose, so we just want to tighten it up on our hook. So that's called a slip knot, and that is the basis that we need to start a chain. Sometimes in the pattern, you won't always need to create a slip knot on the hook first, but when we're starting with a chain, we do. So if we take a look at the pattern together, you'll see using the pink, we first want to make a chain of 10. Now to make the chain, again, if you are more of a beginner, I would say this is almost the trickiest part because we're working with a really small surfaced area. You'll feel all fingers and thumbs, but just take your time, take it slowly, and you will get there. When our yarn is on our hook, it's quite loosey-goosey and sliding around. So what you want to do is find a way to sort of anchor it. So I like to do that by just holding this little tail end between my 2 fingers here. It's not essential, but it just gives you a little bit more tension and control as you work your chain. Then on my non-dominant hand, I've got it wrapped once around my little finger. And again, that is to create a little bit of tension. We don't need to be crocheting super tightly, but just the tension allows us to control the yarn more easily. So I've got it wrapped around my little finger once, and then I also hold it here between my finger and thumb. So to begin our chain, we're going to wrap our yarn from the back to the front of the hook. So you can see we've got our slip knot on our hook here, and then we've also got it wrapped over once. And what we essentially want to do is pull that yarn over through the loop that's already on the hook. So I'm just transferring that tail end to my other hand, and I'm going to hold both the yarn here and pull the hook through. So pull until that wrap reaches what we call the throat of the hook, and then we want to pull it through. to create one chain. So I'll show you that again. I'm holding the yarn steady in this hand and I've got it wrapped around this hand. We're going to wrap from back to front, and then we're going to pull that yarn over through the loop already on the hook to create a chain 2. And the chains look almost like a little V as you're making them. So yarn over and pull through. Now if you want to go back and watch that section as many times as you need to, then please do. But obviously it's just one of those where the more you do it, the more confident you will get. We don't want our chains to be too tight. So we're recommending using a 4mm hook here for the whole of the blanket, but if you are more of a beginner and you do find that your chains are so tight that you find them hard to work into, a tip for you would be to use a hook that is a size larger just when making your chains and getting used to your tension. So I mentioned that we needed a chain of 10. I'm just going to double check how many I've done so far because I've been talking whilst doing it. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we never count the one that's actually on the hook. So I'm going to go ahead and work 5 more to get us up to 10. So here's how our chain of 10 is looking. So again, counting a chain can be tricky when you're not used to identifying those stitches, but we're looking for the little V's in order to check where we have. We're not counting the one on the hook. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And that is our setup for week 1 and what we're starting with. At this point, we don't need to worry about the second colour or the second ball of pink. We're just working from this one ball for the first couple of rounds. So we'll get started on that, and then I will let you know as and when we need to bring in our other balls or our other colours. For the start of week 1, we're going to be working in rows to begin with, turning at the end of each one, so our piece will be flat. We will get to rounds later when we turn our egg shape into a rectangle. Once you have your chain 10, we're ready to work through row 1 of the pattern together. And the stitch that we're going to be using for week 1 is called a half treble crochet, and that's UK terms. To work a half treble crochet, I will take you through that step by step now. And we want to begin by yarning over. We're also going to start working in the 3rd chain from the hook. So let's count that together. We're not counting the one on the hook. We're looking to work in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd chain here from our hook. So we've already yarned over from back to front, and we've located that 3rd chain. So we're going to insert the hook into the chain. We're then going to yarn over again, so yarning over from back to front, and we're going to pull up a loop. So what that means is we're going to pull that wrap we've just made through the chain. So we've now got 3 loops on our hook. And to complete our half treble crochet, we're going to again yarn over, and then we're going to pull through all of those loops. Now we did skip some stitches there, and in our pattern for week 1, you'll see in the notes section it says starting chains do count as stitches unless otherwise stated. So we skipped 2 stitches, and they're now sitting alongside that first half treble that we've made. But because we are counting it as stitch, we essentially count that missed 2 chain as a half treble, and then we've made our second stitch, our first half treble, into that 3rd chain. We then want to work a further 7 half trebles. So I'll show you again how we form that stitch. We're going to yarn over, and then we just want to find now the next unworked chain. We're going to insert our hook, yarn over from back to front and pull up a loop. So pull it through the chain. We've got 3 loops on our hook. We then want to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. Now again, if you're more of a beginner, because we're working on a really small surface area here, you might find this to be the fiddliest part. Again, it's about tension. So as I'm yarning over and pulling through all of those loops, I'm just going to use my thumb on my non-dominant hand to steady the work. So you can see I've got enough space and tension to yarn over and pull through. But if I try and do that without kind of securing this piece in my other hand, it just makes it all too loose and wobbly. So we need a little bit of tension there just to help us. So we can then pull through all of those loops to complete our half treble. So we're going to carry on in this way. We're going to yarn over, insert into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Yarn over, insert into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through all of those loops. So keep going in this way until you reach the end of your chain, and then we'll just check together that we've got the right amount of stitches. So here's how our row 1 is looking at the end. So we skipped 2 chains and then worked our first half treble, and then we worked a further 7 half treble along our chain, so that by the end of row 1 we should have 9 stitches in total, remembering that our chain 2 counts as a stitch. Moving on to row 2, we want to turn our work. So all that simply means in working rows like this is that we want to flip our work over. So for row 1, we were working into the chain, but for this row and all the subsequent rows, we're going to be working into the tops of the stitches from the previous row. So it's the same principle, but it looks slightly different when you're working into the top of a stitch instead of into a chain. We also want to begin our row with a chain 2. So as a reminder of how we worked our chains, we're just yarning over and then pulling through to chain 1, yarning over and pulling through. So we've got a chain 2. And the starting chain is normally relates to the stitch we're using. So our chain 2 is roughly equal in height to half treble, which is our stitch for this row still. We then want to work 1 half treble in the same stitch, the pattern says. So what that means is this chain 2 here is coming out of the stitch below, and it does count as a stitch, but we actually want to increase at the start of this round. So we're going to go ahead and go back into that same stitch again. So we're going to yarn over, insert into this first stitch here for our half treble, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops at once. So we've now got 2 stitches in our first stitch there. We're going to go ahead and increase in the next stitch as well. So in your pattern, you'll see that written as work 2 half trebles in the next stitch. So we're going to yarn over and go into the top of the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through all the loops. And because we wanted to work 2 half treble into that stitch, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to yarn over, rather than going into the next one, we're going to go back into that same stitch that we've currently got our half treble coming out of. Insert into the same stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 3. We then want to work 5 half trebles. So that's 1 into each of the next 5 stitches. Yarning over, inserting, yarning over and pulling up a loop, and then yarning over and pulling through. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we're essentially going to end the row in the same way we started it. So we had 2 increases at the start of the row, and we're going to finish this row with some more increases. So the pattern says 2 half trebles in each of the next 2 stitches. So we're going to yarn over and go into that next stitch and work 1 half treble, and then we're going to do the same thing and work a second one into that stitch. Now you heard me mention earlier that we are counting our starting chains as stitches here. So what you might find as you reach this point in the row is that it almost doesn't look like we've got another stitch left to work into here, but we do, and it's this little chain 2 here which we're treating as a stitch. I do find if you are a beginner that, again, this is one of the trickier things to manage, is recognizing where the sort of first and last stitches are. So my biggest recommendation as we are dealing with increases and decreases in very early on in this stage of the pattern is if you're struggling to see which are the first and last stitches of the row, put one of your stitch markers at either end. So as we get to the end of this row here, we can mark with a stitch marker our last stitch, and then when we come back round for the next row, it'll be much easier to see where the final one is. So we're going to work 2 half trebles in that last stitch. We're going to yarn over and insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then we're going to go in again to the same stitch. And pull through. At the end of row 2, we again want to turn our work ready to start row 3. For row 3, it's very similar. We first want to start with a chain 2, and then we're also going to work a half treble into that stitch. Two half treble in the next stitch, and then our pattern says 9 half treble, so that's 1 into each of the next 9 stitches. We then want to work 2 half trebles into each of the next 2 stitches. So again, we increased in the first 2 stitches of the row, we worked 9 half trebles, and then we're increasing in the last 2 stitches of the row as well. So 2 half treble into the next one. Oops, I just undone my stitch slightly, so let me do that one again. And then again, 2 half treble into the last stitch of the round, which is that chain 2, so it looks slightly different. I've obviously made my chain too tight. Just take your time. So that's 1, and then a second stitch. So there we have it. By the end of row 3, you should have 17 stitches in total. And don't worry if it's looking a little bit misshapen or oddly shaped at this stage. We're trusting the process with our increases, and I promise it will look egg-shaped by the time we finish with it. Now, when you're ready to start row 4, if we look at the pattern together, you'll notice that it's at this point we are going to bring in our second colour, which is our Aran. And because of that, we will also need our second ball of pink. So begin row 4 with a chain of 2. And then a half treble in the same stitch. Two half trebles in the next stitch. So again, we've got 2 increased stitches at the start of that row. We've then got 2 more stitches, 2 more half trebles, I should say, that we want to work in pink before changing colour. So we're going to yarn over and work one of those half trebles as normal. So it's on this next stitch that we're going to change colour. So let's yarn over as normal for our half treble and insert into the stitch. Then yarn over and pull up a loop. For this half treble, ordinarily we would yarn over with the same colour as we've been doing and pull through all of the loops on our hook. What we're going to do instead is bring in our Aran yarn, and we're going to yarn over with this yarn. And again, we just want to make sure that we are leaving ourselves a little tail end so that we've got enough to work with when we get the fun job of weaving in all our ends later. So at this point, we've got our 3 loops of pink on our hook, and then we've yarned over with Aran, and we're going to pull through with Aran to complete the stitch. So if we have a look at that, you'll see that our half treble in pink looks like it's all made in pink, but we now have our Aran yarn ready and set up on our work. So the technique that we are using for our bunny is called intarsia crochet, and that essentially means that for our colour work, we're not bringing our other colours with us. Each time we use a colour, we're going to pick it up and then drop it, pick it up and then drop it. So for now, we're just going to leave our pink, and we're going to leave that tail end hanging down on the back or the wrong side of our work. We now want to work 9 half trebles in Aran. So we're going to yarn over and go into the next stitch, but just to make my life a little bit easier, I am going to work over the top of my tail end just for a stitch or 2. It's not essential, but it just helps tighten things up and sort of starts the weaving in process. So that's 8 half trebles in Aran, and I'm going to go ahead and work the 9th, but just like we did over here, we're also going to change colour on the final yarn over. So for this, we're going to bring in now our second ball of pink. The one that we left on the back of the work over here stays there, and we now use this new ball of pink for all of the stitches in pink on the left-hand side of our work. So yarn over in the pink, leaving yourself a little tail end, and then complete that final stitch in Aran. Leaving all of our tail ends on the wrong side of our work. We then want to work 2 half treble in pink, And then to complete the row, we want to work 2 half treble in each of the next 2 stitches. And I really need to remember to make my chains a bit looser. So that's what it's looking like at the end of row 4, where we've brought in our extra 2 balls of yarn. This is our right side, so everything looks fairly neat. And then the wrong side of our work, where we've got all of our tail ends. So we're going to turn now for row 5. Now, just from a yarn management point of view, to avoid getting really tangled, I'm also going to move my balls of yarn so that they just correspond with the location. So this one is coming to the left, this one is in the middle, and this one is in the right. For row 5, we want to start with a chain 2 and a half treble in the same stitch. We then want to work 4 half trebles. And just like we did before, we want to remember to change colour on the final yarn over of the stitch before we need the colour. So on our 4th half treble in pink, we're going to drop our pink. And because we're on a wrong side row, we want to make sure we're leaving our yarns on this side of the work. We can then pick up our Aran from where we left it and pull through to complete that stitch. We then want to work 11 half trebles in Aran. So the first one we're going to make is into this stitch that was pink on the row before. And then on the 11th stitch in Aran, we're going to change back to pink. So again, you want to bring your yarn tail to the front of the work because we're on a wrong side row, and we're going to pick up this pink where we left off to complete that stitch. We then want to work 4 half treble in pink. And then to complete that row, we want to work 2 half treble in the last stitch. So you'll see that as we work up through the egg, we're varying now where we're working our increases. So I've shown you how to increase at the start and the end of the round. So just keep an eye on that in the pattern. Sometimes it will call for 1 increase, sometimes 2, sometimes none. So just keep an eye on it. We've also shown how to change colour. So remembering to always change colour on the final yarn over of the stitch before you need it. And we've talked a little bit about how to manage your yarns. So this is our right side. It looks all lovely and neat and we can't see any of our tail ends. And this is our wrong side. So this is where we always want to leave our yarns hanging down. So when we're working a wrong side row, we will leave them on the front. And when we're working a right side row, they'll be hanging down on the back. So we're not carrying any of our yarns like you might have done if you've done tapestry crochet. We're always leaving them in sections. So as we change the sort of shape of the bunny as we go up, we'll be changing at different points, but we'll always leave them hanging down there. So here's what mine's looking like at the start of row 6 on the right side of the work. Let's work through one more row together on camera in detail. So again, to avoid getting in a tangle, I'm just going to set up my balls of yarn where I want them. For row 6, we're going to start with a chain 2, and then we're going to work a half treble in the same stitch. We then want to work 4 half trebles in pink, and at the end of the 4th stitch, we're going to drop our pink yarn on the back of our work this time. We're going to yarn over with our Aran and pull through to complete that 4th half treble. We can then make 13 half trebles in Aran. Change colour on the final yarn over of the 13th stitch of Aran, back to our second ball of pink, then 4 half treble in pink, and 2 half treble in pink in the final stitch. So here's how mine is looking at the end of row 6. You should find that you have 25 stitches. We've got all of our yarns hanging down on the wrong side of our work. So I'm going to leave you here in the video to carry on working in this way, paying attention to whether or not you need to increase at the start of the row, and then how many stitches you need to work in either Aran or pink. Changing colour as we've talked about, and always leaving your yarns on the wrong side of the work. I'm going to join you back here at the end of row 18. At that point, we're going to start to decrease the shape of our egg. So I will show you that and we can work through that together. Once you've reached the end of row 18, your work should hopefully be looking a little something like this. And by now you should hopefully also have got to grips with the pattern. So at this point here, we've worked a few rows without increasing or decreasing, but we are now going to start decreasing at the corners. So let's work through that together on row 19. Once you've turned your work ready to start row 19, you should find yourself on a wrong side row. And whereas all of our starting chains so far have counted as stitches, in order for us to make a nice decrease here at the edge, we are going to start with a chain which doesn't count as a stitch. Now, I just mentioned that in the pattern as well, but I just want to point it out because it's different from what we've been doing previously. So begin with a chain 2, but we're not going to count this as a stitch. We then want to work 1 half treble 2 together, which is a way of describing a decrease. So we're going to turn 2 stitches here into 1. So we're going to begin by yarning over, and we're going to go into the first stitch here, yarn over and pull up a loop. So at this stage, if we were working a normal half treble, we would yarn over and complete the stitch. But instead, we're going to start working in the next stitch. So we're going to yarn over again and go into the second stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. So now we've essentially half made 2 half trebles. We can now yarn over and pull through all of those loops on our hook. And you can do it loop by loop if it doesn't go through smoothly in one motion. And so here we've decreased from 2 stitches to 1. And if you are using stitch markers to mark the start and end of your rounds here, you can pop a little stitch marker in the top there, just to help you identify it as you come back at the end of the next row. So once we've worked our 1 half treble 2 together, we then want to work a further 9 half trebles in pink. Nine half trebles in Aran. So changing colour on that last pink stitch. And then 9 half treble in pink, which should leave us with 2 stitches left where we're going to work another half treble 2 together to decrease at the end of the row as well. So here we're working our decrease across the final 2 stitches. I'll show you how we're going to do that again. We're going to yarn over and insert the hook into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. But rather than complete the stitch, we're going to do the same again in the next stitch along. So yarn over and go into the last stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop, and then we can yarn over and pull through all the loops on the hook to decrease. So although we've made those stitches, obviously they don't immediately pull our work in, but they will begin to as we work more on the starts and ends of our rows as we carry on up the work. So just keep an eye on the pattern as you go row by row. We have a couple of rows now where we don't decrease, and then we'll bring in a few more. So obviously our egg, we're staggering the decreases as we go. So just something to watch out for, but you can see there how it works in principle. And as I said, just keep marking the starts and ends of the rows with a stitch marker if you are struggling to keep a check on which is the first and last stitch. Carry on following the pattern in this way for a couple more rows, and I'll meet you back here at the end of row 22 just to talk you through how to manage our yarns as we navigate the top of the bunny's head. So you meet me back here at the start of row 23. I've just turned my work ready to begin, and as you can see, we're on a wrong side row. I'm going to work through this row with you in a little bit more detail, just because we are going to manage our yarns slightly differently here in the middle. And we also need to bring in another little ball of pink. So you can either wind some off or pull some from the middle of your other ball. We don't need too much, so 5 meters should do it, but just a little extra mini ball there before we start this row. So we're going to begin with a chain 2, which does count as a stitch here, no decreasing. And then we want to work 8 half trebles in our pink. And we're a wrong side row, so I'm going to leave my yarn tail on the front of the work. We then want to work 3 half trebles in Aran. And then on the end of this third stitch, we're going to yarn over with pink, but it's at this point that we're going to bring in our extra little ball of pink. So on that third half treble in Aran, we're instead going to yarn over with our third ball of pink. So we've got that ready on the hook to start. And what we've said here in the pattern is for the next 5 stitches only, we're going to carry the yarn not being used. So if you've never carried a yarn before, this is a great little intro. We're just going to do it for a few stitches, but it's also a technique that we will use in tapestry crochet, which is what we are going to be doing in more detail in a later part of the blanket. And essentially all that it means is, rather than leaving our yarn hanging down on the front of the work, like we have been doing with all of our other yarns in this section, we're going to carry the yarn with us. So we're going to work over the top of it. It essentially encases it inside the stitches, and it just means that we'll bring it with us so we can use our Aran again a little bit over here, rather than pulling a big long tail of it across the work. So with the pink on the hook, we are going to first work 1 half treble in pink. So I'm going to yarn over with the pink, and I'm going to insert it into this next stitch here. But in doing so, I'm also going to make sure that that little ball of Aran is running along the top of the work. So I'm going to insert into the next stitch. And can you see here how, as well as my hook being in the work, I've got the Aran on top of the hook as well. We're then going to yarn over with the pink and pull up a loop. But because we only want to work 1 half treble in pink, we're actually going to now drop that yarn over with our Aran again. So this is just trust the process moment, because it does get a little bit fiddly. But because we always change colour on the last yarn over of a stitch, and we're just doing 1 in pink, that's why we're doing it like that. If you find, because we've only done 1 stitch, it's a little bit loose, you can gently pull on those tail ends to tighten that 1 half treble in pink. We then want to work 3 half treble in our Aran colour. And at this point, we are still carrying the yarn we're not using. So that pink that we just let go of, that we just dropped, that's the one we're now going to carry for the next 3 stitches. So yarning over with Aran, going into the next stitch and working over the top of that pink. Yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 3. So you can see there how we've encase the pink inside. We're going to do 2 more half trebles in Aran, working over the top of the pink as we go. And on that third one, we're going to drop our Aran, pick up the pink from inside the work, yarn over and pull through in order to change colour again. Our instructions are then to work 1 more half treble in pink. So again, I'm going to work over the top of the Aran. And because it's just 1 stitch, we're immediately yarning over with the Aran and completing. Our pattern now says we can drop the pink behind the work and work 3 half trebles in Aran. Drop the Aran behind the work, picking up one of our original balls of pink here and yarning over. So we haven't finished the row, we've got a few more stitches left to complete, but let's have a little look at what we've done here. We had our starting part just in pink. We then worked 3 half treble in Aran and brought in our new ball of pink. 3 half treble in Aran here after the single pink, carrying the yarn as we did so. 1 more in pink and then 3 more. So it's, what's the word? It matches up. It is the same on both sides here. Finally, for this row, we're then going to work a further 9 half trebles in pink, which should take us up to the end of the row. Equal is the word I was searching for there. And so far for our week 1, whether you've been following the chart or the pattern, our whole bunny has been equal. So although we've had sort of starting chains, which we treat differently, the number of stitches and the pattern itself has balanced out across the work. So looking at our bunny centre, one of its ears is drooping over and one of it is standing up. Now, if you are right-handed and you're following the pattern or the chart, you should end up, all being well, with your ear drooping in the same direction as ours is. If you are left-handed, you've got a couple of options here. You can either follow along with the exact same instructions, in which case you will end up with a mirror image for your bunny's ear. So the bunny's left ear will be drooping instead of his right ear. If you want yours to be exactly the same, we've also included a left-handed chart. So from here on in, follow the left-handed chart if you want to keep the same ear drooping. So depending on whether it's important to you or not, or whether it will bother you at the end, there is that option there for you. So let's work through the next row together because we are starting with a decrease at the start of row 24. We're going to chain 2 here, and actually I'm going to do as I say, not as I do, and sort out my yarns at this stage before I get any further. So just starting row 24 again, we're going to chain 2, which doesn't count as a stitch. We then want to work 1 half treble 2 together, so decreasing across the next 2 stitches. Then 7 half trebles in pink. Let me try that again. Didn't want to work. We're then going to work 3 half treble in Aran, and we're going to drop that pink behind the work just like you've been doing previously. Just before we do those 5 half treble in pink, I just took a moment to tidy up my yarns because this is a do as I say, not as I do moment, and I got in a bit of a tangle. And here's one I made earlier, I've also prepped myself a little ball of Aran because we are going to need it here for our second ear. And now at this point, we do have quite a few balls attached to the work. So if you're working on a table, that might help. It is only for a little bit longer, and then we will reduce the number of different ones we have attached. But just take your time. We're not working over too many stitches here, so it is manageable if you don't let yourself get in a tangle like I just did. So I've worked 3 half treble in Aran, and I have changed colour to the pink. So I'm now going to work 5 half treble in pink. And it's on this 5th stitch that we want to bring in our second little ball of Aran for our second ear. So again, bringing in our new colour on the final yarn over of that 5th pink stitch. We can now work 4 half treble in Aran. And on this row, we're not carrying any yarns. We're just moving back to our proper intarsia technique of leaving them on the wrong side of the work. So dropping that ball and picking up the final pink ball. We are then going to work 6 half treble in pink. And that should leave us with 2 stitches left on the row, into which we are going to work a half treble 2 together. As if you remember, we decreased at the start of the round, and we want to decrease at the end of the round too. So yarning over and inserting into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. And I didn't quite do that correctly, so let me just do that again. Yarn over, insert into the second stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all of those loops to decrease. So that is how our work is looking at the end of row 24. Carry on working in this way. We've got several balls of yarn attached here, so every time you turn for a new row, just be mindful of taking a moment to sort your yarns out. We're going to work in this way up until row 29, at which point we will break one of our yarns intentionally. So I'm going to take you through that row next. Just bear in mind, as we talked about, now that we are into our different ears, our stitches aren't always the same on either side of the work. So just pay close attention to either the written pattern or the chart, depending on which one you're following, and make sure that you are counting your stitches and changing colour as and when is needed. Meet me back here for row 29 when we will be making our little yarn situation a bit more manageable. You join me back here at the beginning of row 29. I have turned my work ready to begin and we're on a wrong side row. I'm going to work through this row with you, and by the end of this row we were also going to be detaching some of these yarns. So we've been working with all the ones that you can see attached here, but that's becoming a little bit easier by the end of the row. So to begin this row, we want to start with a chain 2, which doesn't count as a stitch here. And then we're working a half treble 2 together across the first 2 stitches. We then want to work 3 half trebles in pink. Slightly missed the stitch there. Three half trebles in Aran. Then 9 half treble in pink. Three half treble in Aran. Then 3 half treble in our final ball of pink. Which should leave us with 2 stitches left to work a half treble 2 together in. So now that we've reached the end of that row, as I said, we can now fasten off a few of our balls of yarn. So we've now finished this ear here, I was going to say the left hand, but it's flipped, the droopy ear, let's call it. So we can detach this Aran ball here. Now we want to leave ourselves a long enough tail end to weave in, and depending on how organised you want to be, you can either do that now, or we can wait till the end of the section and then do them all at the same time. So just cut yourself, as I said, long enough tail so that you've got enough room to comfortably thread a needle and then weave in. So we're still leaving this ball of Aran on here because we've got a few more stitches left to do on that ear. We can also break and fasten off the middle ball of pink. So we're still attached here, we want to leave that one on, but because we've finished this ear, for the next row we can turn and come and work straight across with this ball of pink. So we're not going to be needing to pick up this middle ball of pink again. So again, just leaving yourself a nice long tail end. Simply cut it at this stage and we will come back and weave in those ends. So you can now turn your work, ready to start the next row. We've still got 3 balls of yarn attached, but it's going to be a little bit more manageable for the next couple of rows. So go ahead and work rows 30 and 31. They are the last couple of rows where we're going to be changing colour in our intarsia. From row 32 onwards, we're then only using the pink yarn and we're mainly decreasing and sort of shaping our egg. So carry on working in this way. As I said, when you get back to the single ball of pink, it's going to be a lot more similar to what we did when we began at the bottom. And I'm going to meet you back here at the end of row 36, just to talk you through how we're going to finish off shaping our egg and work our final row of 37. You join me back here at the end of row 36, and here is how our lovely bunny is looking. So we've worked all of our intarsia section to this point. I have broken off all of the yarns except for one ball of pink, which is still attached at the top. And we've also worked all of our decreases up to the last row 36 I worked, which should end with 7 stitches. When you're ready to begin row 37, we're going to turn our work. But this is going to be a little bit of a different row. So we will start by working across the top of our previous row. But then after that, we are going to be working all the way down the side. So we're going to be working into the sides of our rows here. Across the bottom, those stitches that we did right at the beginning of row 1. And then back up this side to the top. So to begin with, we want to chain 1. And then we want to work 7 double crochet into those 7 stitches from the previous row. So to work a double crochet, we don't need to yarn over first. Instead, we're going to insert the hook into the stitch, then yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2. And we want 7 of those in total. So keep working across the top of your work. Now once you've got those 7 stitches, we're going to need a little stitch marker, and we want to mark the very middle of those 7 stitches. So counting in 3 from the outside, we want to put it in that middle one there of the 7. And that is going to be the new start of our next section. So we're going to leave that one in there. Now at this point, we have worked 36 rows to bring us up to the top of our bunny. And if we take a look at the pattern together, you'll see we want to work 48 double crochet evenly down the side. Now obviously 48 doesn't add up to the same amount. We can't work 1 double crochet into the side of each row. It works out approximately we want to work 4 stitches into every 3 rows. There's a couple of different ways that you can manage that. You can guesstimate it if you want to do it by eye to work them evenly, or you can kind of divide up your work into smaller sections. So rather than trying to work 48 evenly, we can kind of work out what the halfway point is and then first focus on working 24 stitches evenly and then 24 here. So whichever sort of makes the most sense to your brain. So I'm gonna segment mine a little bit here, just to make it a little bit easier to see where we want to put our stitches. You can break it up again here and then just focus on working 12 stitches, 12 stitches, and so on. And again, we're sticking to double crochets for the remainder of this round. When you do work into the sides of the rows, it's not an exact science. There's not a sort of top of the stitch to work into in the same way that there is when you're working directly into a row below. But essentially what this is going to do by working all of these stitches across is smooth out our shape a little bit, and it's also going to give us a really nice base of stitches to work our next colour into when we bring in our new flame ball of yarn. So rather than working the flame into the sides where it'll be more obvious that the stitches are uneven, we're going to use the pink, smooth it off nicely, and then that'll give us a really nice base of stitches to work our next section into. So go ahead and work your 48 double crochet evenly down the side until you reach the base here, at which point we're going to work 9 double crochet across the bottom, and then we're going to do the same thing up the second side. We're going to work 48 double crochet evenly up this side until you reach your 7 stitches at the top. So as you can see, we want to catch the edges of those stitches. And I'm aiming to make 12 before I hit this marker. So yeah, that's what it looks like as I've worked 12 stitches evenly into the side. I'm now going to carry on in this way, working evenly into the sides of the rows until we get to the bottom. You join me back here. I've just worked all of those 48 stitches evenly across the side. I used my stitch markers to help me, and now I've reached this section here where we are back at the base. So what we want to do after working those 48 double crochets evenly down the side of the egg, we want to work 9 double crochet across the bottom. So that should, in theory, be working into the 9 stitches that we set up the whole egg with along the bottom. So compared to working into sides, it's much easier to see. Main thing is that our stitch count is correct, because the stitch count that we are setting up here with this pink row is then going to inform the next section of our blanket as well. Once you've worked your 9 double crochet across the bottom, we're then going to go ahead and do the same thing again up our second side, work 48 double crochet evenly across the side, which should bring you back up to where we started this row, or it's probably more accurate to call it a round. To finish off, we are going to slip stitch into the top of that first double crochet we made. So this stitch marker that we placed here in the middle of the 7 stitches, we want to leave that in, but we're not aiming to crochet all the way back to that. So your 48 stitches should end when you hit this double crochet here. This stitch marker is going to indicate where we want to begin with our next colour. So carry on working in that way, and I'll meet you back here at the end of the round to show you how to do that slip stitch if it's not something you've done before, and then we'll move into joining on our new colour. So you join me back here right at the end of row 37. I've just worked my second lot of 48 double crochets evenly up the second side, and it's brought me back up to this point where we started with our 7 double crochet at the top. So we have finished now with our pink yarn for this section, which means that we can slip stitch to join the yarn, and we can fasten off and break our pink yarn here as well. So to begin with, I'm going to insert my hook into the top of the first double crochet we made, and yarning over, I'm then going to pull that loop through the stitch. And in order to slip stitch, I'm also going to pull that new loop through the one that's already on the hook. So in doing that, we've slip stitched to join. We can also now cut our yarn, leaving a long enough tail end to weave in later. And we can do a final slip stitch here to fasten off. So we're going to yarn over, and pull that loop through the one on the hook, but because we've cut our tail end, we can just keep on pulling until the tail comes through as well. So slip stitching it through, then just pull, 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 and you can give a gentle little tug on the tail end there as well to secure it. So there we have it. That is our row 37, which has finished off our egg. We've worked all the way round and we've given ourselves a base to start the next section into. Leave that stitch marker there for a moment in the middle of the 7 double crochets we made along the top, because that's where we're going to start off for our next section. We're now ready to bring in, excitingly, a new colour. So you're going to need your ball of flame for this next section. And we're going to, as I said, start working here in this middle section. So begin by creating a slip knot on your hook. And we also want our work on the right side now. So assuming, like me, you haven't yet sewn in your ends, we want those messy ends on the back, and we're going to start on the right side. And we're going to begin by making a chain 3 in this center stitch here, which does count as a stitch here. It counts as a treble. So with your slip knot on your hook already, we're going to insert the hook into that stitch, yarn over, and slip stitch to join it on, and then we're going to chain 3. We then want to work 2 treble, so that's 1 treble in the next stitch. For a treble, let me show you that again. We're first going to yarn over and insert into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through 2 for a treble. So that is going to be our stitch all the way around for this section. So we've done one of them, we want to now do another in the next stitch. We then want to work 2 treble in the stitch after that, so an increase. So going back into that same stitch again. What we're going to do here, because we've got a curve at the top of our work, we're going to position all of our increases at the top and then the bottom of our work. So far, because our chain 3 counted as a stitch, we've got 3 trebles and then 2 in the next stitch. And then we're going to go into that as a little bit of a pattern now. So if you do want to take a look at your pattern, you'll see that it says in brackets 3 treble and then 2 treble in the next stitch times 2. So let's work through that together. We're going to work 3 trebles, 1 in each of the next 3 stitches. And then 2 treble in the stitch after that. And because we want to do that twice, we're going to do it one more time. That's 3 trebles, and then 2 in the stitch after that. Looking ahead at our pattern, we're then going to work 32 treble down this side, and when we reach the bottom, we'll be back into our little stitch pattern repeat from the brackets here. So we'll be working 3 treble, 2 treble in the next stitch, and we'll repeat that 6 times, which should bring us all the way around this bottom section here. So work your 32 trebles down the side in this way. For the purposes of the video, because our top and our bottom of this section are going to be exactly the same, I am going to work part of this with you, and then we are going to skip ahead to the end of the round. But as you can see, now we're working in our trebles, we're working into that lovely double crochet base that we made for ourselves at the end of the last round. So you can follow the pattern, work the required amount of stitches, and make sure you're working those repeats at the bottom, just like we did at the top. I will meet you back here towards the end of this round as we work the final part of our round. So you join me back here in round 1, where I've just worked my second set of 32 trebles up the second side of our centre panel. So we're now at the section of the pattern that says 3 treble, 2 treble in the next stitch, 3 times. So you'll have worked your increases here, 32 down the side, the increases round the bottom, and hopefully be joining me back up here ready to work our final bit in brackets before the end of the round. So we're going to work, as I said, that bit in brackets. We're going to work 3 treble, and then 2 treble in the next stitch, and we're going to do that 3 times. So 3 treble, and 2 in the next stitch, and a 3rd time, three treble, and then 2 treble in the next stitch. And that has brought us up to the end of round 1. So to finish off this round, we want to slip stitch into the top of the first chain 3 to join. So that was this chain 3 here, which counted as a stitch. We want to insert our hook into the top there. We're then going to yarn over and pull through all the loops on our hook to slip stitch to join. We don't want to turn here for this next row only. We are going to move straight into round 2, working into the tops of these stitches. So we're going to begin with a chain 3, which again counts as a treble. We then want to work 1 treble in the next stitch. Two treble in the stitch after that. And then 4 trebles. Two treble in the stitch after that. Four more trebles. We then want to work 2 treble in the stitch after that. But we're going to do something in that second treble, which is to place a stitch marker. And the reason for this is that after this round, we are going to move to squaring off, or rectangling off, if that's a word, our oval. And this is where our corner is going to start. So we're going to place a stitch marker in the second treble of that section. We then want to work 2 more trebles. Which brings us to the end of our little increase section that we've worked here. So essentially what we've done there is, whereas on the previous round we worked 3 treble and an increase, 3 treble and an increase, 3 treble and an increase, on this round we've sort of worked 4 and an increase, 4 and an increase, but we've just offset our stitches slightly to get them to sit where we want to for that corner for the next round. So we are now ready again to work 32 treble down the side of our piece, after which we'll work our increases along the bottom as dictated in the pattern again, and we're working a 2 treble, increase, 2 treble. We can then work 32 treble back up the next side before working our increases to match what we did here. So go ahead and work your 32 treble down the side and your increases round the base. And we'll do the same thing again. I'm going to do my slightly, here's one I made earlier. I'm going to make you do all the way around, but I'm going to cheat and meet you back here for the final increase section. You meet me back here in round 2 after having worked 32 trebles up the side of my egg. Let's call it an egg. We're now going to work our final section in brackets. So we want to work 2 trebles, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches, then 2 treble into the next stitch, so an increase, and then 2 treble, 1 in each of the next 2 stitches. So that's our instructions in brackets. It then says times 3. So we want to repeat it 3 times in total. I've just done that once, so let's do it another 2 times. 2 treble, 2 treble in the next stitch, and 2 treble. For our final repeat, 2 treble, 2 treble in the next stitch, and then 2 treble, which should bring us to the end of our round. We're then going to slip stitch into the top of our starting chain 3 to join. So again, to slip stitch, we're just inserting the hook first, yarning over and pulling through all the loops on the hook. This is also the last of our flame stitches in this section. So we can also cut our yarn here, leaving a long enough tail end to weave in. And then we can do one final slip stitch to fasten off. So yarning over and then pulling all the way through until the tail end comes all the way through. Give it a gentle tug. And there you have it. If I keep mine like this on camera, we can pretend I've worked all the way around like you have. And we've worked our 2 rounds of flame really nicely into our egg. And we've marked, importantly, our stitch here where we are going to begin the next section of our work to create a corner. When you're ready to begin this next section, we're going to need our grass coloured yarn. As we mentioned, ignoring where we started and ended the previous round, we are now going to be starting here and creating a corner. And it's also important to note from this point on in the pattern, we're going to be working in rounds, but we're going to switch to turning at the end of each one. So for this round here, which we're calling round 1 of the grass section, we want to begin with our work on the right side. So again, all those ends which we haven't yet woven in, we want them on the back, and we want to begin here on the right side. So you can either start with a slip knot on your hook, or you can attach your yarn however you prefer. But we are going to want to begin specifically at this stitch here, because that's where we're going to create our corner. So we don't need to keep our stitch marker in indefinitely, but I'm just going to leave it whilst I create this first section. And we're going to begin here with a chain of 4. The other thing to note for this round is we want to work all of our stitches in the back loop only. So ordinarily we would be inserting our hook through the top of a stitch like this, but if we take a moment to look at the top of the stitch, it looks like a little V on the top of our work, and so it's actually made up of what we can separate out and call a front loop and then a back loop. So for all of our stitches for this round only, we want to work them in the back loop only. So we're going to begin, as I said, with a chain 4. At the stitch with the stitch marker into the back loop only. If the back loop only part is throwing you out, it's not essential, it's more of a design feature to give us a really crisp edge on this orange section. So as I said, begin with the chain 4. This counts as a double treble, which is a nice new stitch for us. We're then going to go back into the same stitch and work a double treble in the back loop only. I'm going to remove my stitch marker now so we know where we're working. So for a double treble, it is, as it suggests, double the height of a treble. So whereas for a treble we yarn over once, for a double treble we're going to yarn over twice to begin with. We're then going to go into that back loop only, yarn over and pull up a loop. We then want to yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And this is where it's taller than a treble because it's got another yarn over and pull through 2 loops. So into that stitch now we've got a chain 4, which counts as 1 double treble, and an actual double treble. We now want to work, and we are going to switch between stitches a little bit here, but it's what we need to do to kind of square off our corner. So we're going to work 2 double trebles, 1 into each of the next 2 stitches. So yarning over twice, going into that back loop only, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2 3 times. So that's another double treble. 1 more into the next stitch, yarn over twice, into the back loop, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops 3 times. So there's some really tall stitches there, and that's going to give us the height we need to square off our curve. Once you've worked those 2 double treble, we're then going to work 4 trebles. And again, we're doing all of this in the back loop only. So back to the stitch we were working on the previous round. 1, 2. All into the back loop only. 3 and 4. And if I just pause here and show you, where we're leaving those front loop onlys unworked, it's leaving that little ridge along the front of our work. And that's all really we're looking to achieve, so it gives us a really nice solid edge between our 2 colours. So after those 4 trebles, we can then work 4 half trebles. So our stitches are getting shorter. For a half treble, as a reminder, we're yarning over, going into the back loop only, yarn over and pull up a loop. Then we're going to yarn over and pull through all of those loops. So the half treble is the stitch we were using for our bunny. And we're going to make 4 of those all into the back loops only. After those 4 half trebles, we can then work 16 double crochet, again all into the back loop only. So for a double crochet, we are not yarning over first. Instead, we're going straight into that back loop only, then yarning over and pulling up a loop, then yarning over and pulling through 2. And you want to make 16 of those double crochets, all into the back loop only. Now I am working on a slightly smaller surface area here than you, but here is what it's looking like. Where we've gone from double treble to half treble to double crochet, you can see how our stitch height has reduced, and that is what we're looking for here. We are aiming to square off our corner, and it's going to take us a couple of rounds because we're turning it from a curve to a rectangle. But varying our stitch height in that way is allowing us to set up for a nice squared off edge. So as I said, you will need to work 16 double crochet. When you reach the other edge, you're essentially repeating in reverse what we just did here. And we're going to be creating a corner as well. For the purposes of the video, I'm going to move over to this side and work up to repeat what we did here. But I will show you here how to work the corner in full so that you're able then to repeat it on all 4 corners as and when you get to that part of the pattern. So follow the pattern sequence as we've laid it out. I am going to spin my work round here and rejoin. So where I've shown you on this side how to decrease the height of your stitches, I'm also now going to show on this side how we will then increase the height of our stitches here. So the principle will then be the same whether or not you're working the first corner, the second corner, the third corner or the fourth corner. But do keep an eye on the stitch counts in the patterns because the top here is not the same stitch count as the sides. So you join me back here as I approach the third corner. But as we talked about, the principle here will be the same whether or not you're working down the first side or coming up to this final corner. Just keep an eye on those stitch counts. After working 16 double crochet, we're going to, as I said, reverse what we did to begin with. So we're going to now increase the height of our stitches again as we approach the corner. So we're going to work 4 half treble, all in the back loop only still. 4 treble, and then 2 double treble. So again, we need to yarn over twice for a double treble. It is a little bit taller than our ordinary treble. So you can see how we've worked the reverse there. By increasing the height of our stitches, we're now bringing ourselves back up to get ready to make a corner. So to create the corner, we're first going to work 2 double treble in the back loop only of the next stitch. Going into that same back loop again. And we're then going to chain 2. We then want to work 2 double treble into the next stitch. And so where we added that chain 2 in between those 2 increases, that is as simple as that, how we will create our corners. We then want to work 2 double treble 3 trebles, three half trebles, and 12 double crochets, all still into the back loop only. So here you can see a full corner where we are increasing that shaping and that stitch height up to the corner, decreasing the stitch height again as we come over the top. You will of course need to do all of your corners in this way. Just keep an eye on those stitch counts because it is different for the tops than it is for the sides. I'm going to carry on here and show you how to join into where we started to create our final corner, and then I'll show you how we will turn and begin for the next round. So after that 12 double crochet working along the top, we then want to do a mirror of what we did here. We're going to do 3 half trebles, three trebles, and 2 double trebles, remembering to yarn over twice. And that should leave us at this point in the pattern with 1 stitch left to work into. So into that stitch we're going to work 2 double trebles. We then want to chain 2 to form our corner, and we're going to slip stitch into the top of our starting chain 4 in order to both form that corner and to finish off our first round of grass. So here's how mine is looking now that I have begun to square off our shape. We worked in the back loop only, which has given us that nice crisp shaping so that we haven't lost that lovely egg shape that we made. And we've focused on how we create double trebles, going down to treble, half treble and double crochet in order to give us different stitch height. Now that we've slip stitched into the top of the starting chain 4, we are going to turn our work. And we are working now in turned rounds. So this is going to be what you'll need to do at the beginning of each round. For round 1 of the grass, as we worked on the right side, we first worked down the long edge. Because we're turning our work here and we are now working a wrong side row, we will also now be working our short edge first. And so we will switch between them in that way for pretty much the rest of the blanket actually. That's how we're going to be working now. So at the beginning of round 2 of our grass section, we are going to begin with what we're calling 1 slip stitch into the corner. Now to do that is pretty much just to move our yarn around a little bit to get us in a better position to work into the top of our rows here. So insert your hook into the middle of the corner, so just right into that chain 2 space there. Then we're going to yarn over with our hook and pull it through and then slip stitch. It doesn't need to be super tight, but it just brings our hook and our yarn up a little bit more so that we are now working into the top, into this short edge row. We also don't need to worry anymore about working into the back loop only, as you may be pleased to hear. So we are just now working into the tops of stitches as we have done previously. So to begin round 2, we want to first work a chain 4, which counts here again as a double treble. Then we want to work 1 double treble into the chain 2 corner space. So you don't need to work it into the actual chain of the corner itself. We're simply going to go into the corner, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops 3 times. Once you've worked into the corner, we're now working all the rest of the stitches into the tops of the stitches from the previous round. So we want to work 1 double treble, then 1 treble, two half trebles, and then a nice run of 24 double crochets, which is going to take us across our work. So carry on working your double crochet. I'm trying to count whilst I'm talking, which is never a good one. Go ahead and make 24, and then I will meet you back here to work the remainder of these stitches and show you how we're going to work into our new corner that we've formed. After those 24 double crochet, which should have taken you all along your short edge, we are going to work 2 half trebles, one treble, and then 1 double treble, which should bring us up to our new corner. So if we have a look at the pattern together, you'll see that we've got some instructions in brackets. And normally when you see instructions in brackets in a pattern, it means that all of those stitches need to be worked either in a pattern repeat or into the same section. So here for us, for our corner, we've got 2 double treble, chain 2, then 2 double treble in brackets, after which it says into the corner space. So we know that we need to make all of those stitches into our corner. And again, we don't need to work them directly into this chain, which is quite tricky. We are just going into the space itself. So if you've ever done any granny squares or anything with corners before, you might be familiar with this, but I will show you. We're going to yarn over twice for our double treble, and we're going to insert our hook into that big space there. We're then going to yarn over and pull up a loop, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops 3 times for our first double treble. So we're going to go back in with our next double treble. We can then chain 2 before working the final 2 double trebles into that corner space. So just going on right into the corner itself. The other thing to be mindful of when you're crocheting before and after a corner is just to make sure that you're not then missing the top of the stitch immediately after the corner. So you can see this is the next stitch that we want to work into here. So after those stitches in brackets at the corner, we've then got 1 double treble in the next stitch, 2 treble, I've just dropped that, so I'll make that treble again. That's the first one, and then the second one in the next stitch. 5 half trebles, and then we've got an instruction to make 24 double crochet. So because I'm working on a slightly smaller area than you will be, I haven't got the space to make all those 24 double crochets, but you will be able to, and it'll take you down to your next corner and your next section where you will then begin to increase the height of your stitches again up to the next corner. So again, here's how that corner is looking. It's not exactly square. Don't worry if it's looking a little bit wobbly. Again, we're focusing on building up our stitches to square it off across a couple of rows. So carry on with your stitches. We're going to work all the way around, and I will meet you back here towards the final corner, just to remind you how we're going to finish off the corner and then turn ready for the next round. You join me back here at the end of round 2. You will have worked all the way around for round 2. And the point that I'm at here is I have worked the final double treble at the end of the round before the instructions in brackets. So the final instructions in brackets for the round are to work 2 double treble and a chain 2 into the corner chain 2 space. So let's do that together. The corner here will look a little bit different to our other corners because this is where we started, and so we have partially already worked some of our stitches into this corner. So we want to work 2 double treble right into that large corner space. We then chain 2. And then we want to slip stitch into the top of our starting chain 4 to join. And so in doing so, we've finished off this row, and we have also created the final corner with our chain 2 here. So you can see there where our corners are starting to stack above each other. So because we're always joining here at the corner, sometimes they can look a little bit ever so slightly different to our other corners, but broadly we are treating it in exactly the same way. So once you've reached the end of round 2 and you have joined, we again want to turn, ready for round 3. And again, you will want to start, as our pattern says, with 1 slip stitch into the corner. Now for rounds 3 and 4 of our pattern, we're continuing in a very similar way to the previous round. We're still building up the heights of some of our stitches, especially at the corners, just to square them off a little bit more. So I am going to leave you here in the video to work through rounds 3 and 4 on your own. We're going to be using same stitches as we have for the previous round in the same way, working now into the tops of the stitches and treating those corners in the same way. So where you have started now on a right side row and you've slip stitched into the corner, we'll be working down the long edge first. So go ahead and work the next 2 rounds, round 3 and 4 of our grass section. And I will meet you back here for round 5. So once we've squared everything off, I really want to say rectangled everything off, but I'm pretty sure that's, again, still not a word. Once we've done that and made it all nice and neat, we're going to make it a different shape again because we're going to start bringing in our ripples. So that's the point at which I'll meet you again, ready for round 5, where we're going to set up our ripple stitch for the final part of week 1. You join me back here at the beginning of round 5. So hopefully now you have worked all 4 rows of the grass and our edges are looking a little bit smoother and neater, just in time for us now to create our lovely wave or ripple stitch. So we're on a right side row, and so we should be working down our long edge first for this part of the pattern. I've already made my 1 slip stitch into the corner after turning, and so now we want to chain 3 at the corner, which counts as a treble. We then want to work 1/2 treble next to it. So whereas all our preceding corners have had 2 stitches of the same variety in them, if you will, into this corner we want 1 treble and then a 1/2 treble. So we're going to yarn over and go into that corner, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 3. And then what we're essentially doing for this round is we're working in an 8-stitch pattern repeat. And the reason we've got 2 different stitches there at the corner is because we're going straight into that pattern. So we've got a treble and a half treble into the corner. We then want to work 4 double crochets. So going straight into this next stitch, we don't need to yarn over first. We're going to work 1, 2, 3, and 4. After that, we've got 1 half treble, so yarning over first for our half treble, pulling through all the loops, and then a treble. So those 8 stitches that we've made there, starting right in our corner, is our little pattern repeat. And if we have a look at the printed pattern or written pattern together, you'll see that we've now got those instructions again, but in brackets. So it says 1 half treble, so it says, just to confuse you before we've even begun, in the brackets we've got 1 treble, then 1 half treble, 4 double crochet, 1 half treble, and 1 treble. And then it says times 5 after the brackets. So for your long edge row, we've done 1 here, you're then going to work a further 5 in that part of the pattern. So let's work through one of those together, another one of those together. We're going to start with 1 treble, then 1 half treble, 4 double crochets, 1 half treble, and 1 treble. So you can see it's starting to wave a little bit here, and that is essentially what we are going to be doing for the whole of this round. This is almost a sort of setup row for our actual ripple stitch, which is going to be in round 6. So carry on in this way, repeating that little 8-stitch pattern repeat. As we said, it's in brackets and we've got a times 5 after it. So follow your pattern in that way, and it'll then bring you up to a final section before the corner. I'm going to carry on now off camera, and I'm going to come back round and work the final 2 repeats with you on the camera before we hit the final corner. So if you carry on in your round until just before you reach the end, and I'll meet you back here and show you how to join it and then how we're going to work our proper ripple for the next row. Once you have worked all the way around round 5 and you are on the final short edge of your pattern, the point that I'm at here is where we've just worked the 4th repeat of the times 4 in brackets. But I just wanted to work through the final section with you to show you how we're going to finish up the round and work the final part of the pattern into the corner. So as I said, I've just worked, we're going to imagine it together 4 times across the top there, if with that times 4 in brackets. So then the final instructions for the round are 1 treble, 1 half treble, and 4 double crochet. Which should bring me up to the corner. And then just like we did right at the start of the round, and for your other corners, we want to work a half treble into the corner and a treble into the corner. We can then chain 2 and slip stitch into the top of the first chain 3 we did, which counted as a treble, in order to join. So that is the end of round 5, which is a right side row. So we now want to turn our work ready to start round 6. So for round 6, just like we always do at the corner, we want to make 1 slip stitch into the corner to bring our hook round and up to the top of the work. We then want to chain 2, which counts here as a half treble. And then we want to work half treble into the corner. So we're back to our matching stitches in the corner. Our next instructions then come in brackets. So we want to work 2 half treble into the next stitch. And we are working now half trebles for the whole round. But the shaping is going to come through our increasing and decreasing. So we've worked 2 half treble into the corner, then 2 half treble into the next stitch as an increase. We then want to work 1 half treble. And then our pattern wants us to work 2 half trebles 2 together. So we did do some decreased stitches earlier on, but let's remind ourselves how we're working that half treble 2 together, like we did when we were working our bunny decreases. We're going to yarn over and go into the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, but we're not going to yarn over and complete that half treble stitch. Instead, we're going to yarn over and go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. And then we want to yarn over and pull through all of those loops on our hook in order to decrease from 2 stitches to 1. We want to make 2 of those, so we're going to do that again across the next 2 stitches. Yarn over and insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over again and insert into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all of those loops. We've then got 1 half treble on its own. And then the final instruction in the brackets is 2 half treble in the next stitch. And so that little, again, 8 stitch pattern repeat we did there, ignoring the 2 we worked into at the corner. We had 2 half treble in the first stitch, 1 in the next, then 2 half treble 2 togethers, 1 half treble in the next, and then 2 increases in the final stitch. So we increase twice in that 8 stitch repeat, but we also decrease twice. So we actually end up with the same number of stitches. The reason for the increasing and the decreasing is because it starts to cinch our work into that ripple shape. So that was one of our repeats in brackets. Well, we actually want to repeat that 6 times. So let me work through with you once more in our stitch pattern repeat. We've got 2 half treble in the first stitch, then 1 half treble, then 2 half trebles 2 together, so 2 decreases over the next 4 stitches. Then 1 half treble, and the final part of our instruction in the brackets is 2 half treble in the next stitch. So I've worked 2 repeats there because I'm working on a slightly smaller swatch size. You're going to go ahead and repeat that 6 times, working along this short edge. We're then going to be back to working 2 half treble, chain 2, 2 half treble in the corner, before coming back down again the long edge and working those our little stitch pattern in the brackets 7 times along the longer edge. So follow your pattern as indicated, and again those brackets are indicating our sort of repeat and our stitch patterns. I am going to again cheat and come back round here to show you how we're finally joining at the corner. But you are of course going to do the hard work and go and work all the way around, setting up and creating that lovely curvy ripple stitch. I will meet you back here at the very end of the round and show you what the final corner join is looking like. You join me back here at the end of round 6. I've just worked the final repeats as instructed in the brackets. So the last thing we have to do is work our 2 half trebles into our corner. We're then going to chain 2 and slip stitch into the top of the starting chain 2 to join. We can then turn our work, and we can also actually, getting ahead of myself, we can fasten off our grass green colour here. So it might be easier to do that before you turn your work. We are going to continue for a couple more rounds now that we've set up with this stitch pattern, but we're going to switch to using a really lovely bright pink colour called Cupid. So cut your yarn. We've already slip stitched at the corner there. Cut your yarn, leaving a long enough tail end to weave in. I'll be honest, I've just cut that a little short, so do as I say, not as I do. We're then going to yarn over and slip stitch to secure, to sort of fasten off. And just to keep an eye on your little corner space there and how it's looking, because we are going to turn and then work into that for our right side row with our pink colour. So this is our lovely pink. We've got 2 pinks in the blanket, and this is our lovely Cupid colour. So we're going to join on at the corner. We're starting on a right side row here, and so we're going to be working along our long edge first. But because we are attaching this anew, we don't need to start with a slip stitch at the corner because we don't need to bring our yarn round like we have been. So instead we can just go straight in at the corner, yarn over with our new colour and bring it round. We can then start with a chain 2 and then a half treble into the corner as well. And because this row is almost identical to the row below, I'm going to do one of my lovely, here's one I made earlier moments, and skip ahead and let you work these next 2 rounds, in Cupid, just as we did with the previous round with our stitch pattern repeat and working through those repeats. The only thing to note, obviously, because our corners grow, for each new round, we do have a slightly different number of stitches before we get into the actual pattern. So when we did our setup row, we went straight into the 8 stitch repeat. On the previous row, we had 2 at the corner before we went into our pattern repeat. And on this corner, we've got 2 at the corner. Then we've got 2 half trebles. And then we are working our 8 stitch pattern repeat. And that'll be the same for each of the corners and the sort of lead up to the corners. So just keep an eye on that, because for the round after this as well, we'll have gained extra stitches on the corner too. But otherwise, we're still working those 8 stitches, your 2 half treble, 1 half treble, your 2 half treble, 2 togethers, 1 half treble, and then 2 half treble in the next stitch, repeating in that pattern as you go along. So go ahead and work those 2 rounds of Cupid, and then I will meet you back here at the very end to show you how our complete week 1 is looking like and to talk through the next stages together. Once we have finished rounds 7 and 8 with our Cupid yarn, Hopefully, and here's where I've, like I said, done it. Here's one I made earlier. Our piece should be looking a little something like this. You can really see now our wavy ripple stitch and how it's taking shape. So we set it up with our grass and then we've completed it with our Cupid colour. So this is the point at which we're going to finish the main part of our panel for week 1, and we will pick up again here for week 2. But I quickly wanted to show you a couple of techniques for you to finish off week 1. One is weaving in ends. So when it comes to weaving in our ends, I'm going to demonstrate this to you, and it might be something you've done plenty of times before, in which case feel free to skip ahead. But if you haven't and you want a little mini tutorial on how best to handle this, then I'll talk you through it very quickly. And again, this is really one of those situations where if you keep on top of your ends week to week as we work through, it really does make the project a lot more enjoyable. But, you know, we all work differently, and I personally do really enjoy leaving them all to the end. So we are going to thread our tail end onto a yarn needle, and this is where it's helpful to leave a little bit of an end there, just so that, you know, you want it at least longer than the yarn needle itself. And some people do like to work over their stitches a little bit to help fasten them in, which is good, but it's also really a nice idea when we're sewing in our ends to do it in a few different directions. So if you imagine like general movement of your blanket, if we just sew it once in one direction, it's going to be more likely to wiggle itself free. So thread your yarn end on your yarn needle, and then we're going to aim to sew and almost just like catch the back of our stitches. What we don't want to do is sort of sew all the way through so that the yarn needle is visible there as well. We're just catching the backs of stitches here. So there I've gone through the backs of sort of 3 stitches. It's then nice to, as I said, change direction or kind of come at it from a slightly different angle. We're not looking to pull really tightly. It's just more that change in direction that is going to help secure our end and stop it unraveling later on. So there I've kind of taken it in 3 different directions. I'd say that is probably enough. So I'm simply now going to cut the yarn close to the work. And there we have it. Obviously we're working with quite a few different colours here, so it's probably best practice when you're weaving your end in just to make sure you're weaving it in on the colour stitch that the end is, matching it up if you will, just to make it even less noticeable. So go ahead and weave all of your ends in now on the wrong side of your work, on the reverse of your work. We're going to talk through a final technique now for the front of our blanket, and it's a lot smoother a process if all of the ends are woven in for this next section. So the final skill and technique I want to show you for week 1 is a surface crochet technique. And if you have done one of my previous blankets, the gingerbread cowl, then we did use this technique on there as well for our lights. So it's very similar to that if you have done that one. We're going to use our white colour for the first time. And the key thing with this technique is that we want to have our hook on the top of the work, but we need our yarn to be held underneath the work. So in theory, you can wait and you can do this later on, but as your blanket grows and the kind of more fabric you have to work with, the trickier this gets to manage. So this is the sort of perfect stage at which to do this technique and to put the surface crochet on, just because the size of our work is that bit more manageable. So with your hook on the front or the right side of your work and the yarn held on the back or the wrong side, we're going to insert our hook from front to back where we want our stitch to begin. Now I have done a wiggly line, essentially, quite free form. So you can copy that exactly, copy the picture that we've done. I've worked it over the first round of grass and then the sort of last round of our flame, our orange colour. So let me show you to start off with how to do it. It is very easy to frog or undo. So if you're not happy with how your stitches are looking, then you can very easily pull it out. But what I will say is think of this as kind of sketching or drawing. So it's not going to be really precise and neat. It's quite free form. So I'm going to stick my hook here from the front to the back, sort of in between that flame and the grass section. Then I'm going to yarn over at the back, and do leave yourself a little tail end here. Essentially, we want to pull up a loop through our work. For the surface crochet stitches, it's essentially like chaining on the front of your work. But the main thing to bear in mind is we don't want our stitches to become too long, because that's when we're likely to distort and pull the fabric underneath. So instead, we're going to aim to make our stitches, our surface crochet stitches, almost sort of like one stitch wide or one row wide, if you will. Keep them fairly short. So I've got essentially a loop here on the front of my work with my hook in it. I'm now going to put my hook again down through the work, and I'm going to yarn over again on the reverse. Now, to start off with, you might want to kind of keep looking and locating the yarn, but actually you can kind of feel where it is and do it by feel as you get into it and you get used to it. So we're yarning over underneath the work and then pulling up a new loop there to the front of the work. And then essentially we're slip stitching, so we're going to pull the loop that we've just made through the one that's already on the front of the work there. So you can see how it's almost made a chain stitch on the front of the work. And it might be a little bit loose to begin with, but you can end up tightening up your little tail end afterwards. So don't worry too much about that first stitch. And that is pretty much what we're going to do each time. So send your hook back to the back of your work again. Then we're going to yarn over under the work, pull up a new loop, and then pull it through the one that's already on the front of the work. And we're going to keep going in that way. Now, what I have found as I've done a little bit more of this is you almost want to move your work rather than moving your hook around. So you kind of want to point your hook in the direction that you want to move or want to make your line. But just take your time with this one. I think a lot of people are surprised by actually what a fun technique it is to do, almost sort of like drawing on the top of your work. And you will start to get a feel for how to change direction and how to create ourselves a nice little curve as we work around. But I'll show you how easy it is to frog if you're not happy with it. You simply pull and all those stitches will start to undo. And then so you can undo a few and you can go back in. But like I said, I think this is just quite a trust the process one. Make a start, have a go. Don't worry about all of your loops being exactly the same. When I say loops, I mean the kind of curvy shape. Don't worry about them all being identical. We're going for quite a free form, soft and organic feel with our surface crochet. If you start to feel that your work is puckering underneath, it's probably just that you're pulling the stitches too tight. So you're going to continue in this way, making your wavy shape. Obviously, I have not completed my wave all the way around, but when you do, and when you get back to a point where you're ready to fasten off and finish, I'll just show you how we will do that. So we would need to cut our tail end on the reverse of the work. And then we're going to pull a loop all the way up so that we're kind of ended up there just with a little tail end. Then to finish it off, we simply take our hook underneath the work, yarn over once, and then pull that down underneath. And if you're at a point here where you're looking to kind of join your work up, you can angle that so that you then pull it down inside that first chain or surface crochet, if you will, so that it completes our loopy and wavy stitch and joins it into a full, it's not a circle, a full shape. After that, you can then just weave in your ends on the reverse of your work like you would ordinarily if you were working a normal stitch. So there you have it. That's how to add our little surface crochet to give ourselves a little freeform wavy line all the way around that section. So by the end of week 1, if you are more of a beginner, you will have learned a whole load of new skills here. We first talked through how to work in rows and change colour. Then we looked at how to work in the round. And those are 2 really key formative techniques that you're going to need in any project moving forward. So that's a great thing to have under your belt to have worked those 2 things already. If you are a more experienced crocheter and you've done a few blankets with us before, then by the end of week 1, you'll also be in a position where you have a really beautiful center of your blanket, and we've already accomplished such a lot. Just a reminder, if you are doing this and you're worried about keeping up, the main point of the blanket and the crochet along is to really have fun and enjoy it. So please don't put pressure on yourself to have finished it by a certain day or a certain time. Chip away at it, work away at it, enjoy it, and it will come together in no time before you know it. Don't forget as well that the pattern and the video for week 1 will stay up on the website forever. So you can come back to them, you can watch them as many times as you like, and they'll stay up there for the remainder of the blanket as well. We will just keep uploading the new weeks as we move through. Another really great resource if you want a little bit more help, or if you just want to join in the fun and see everybody else's blankets start to grow, is our Facebook group, the Sirdar Make Along. You can join and just come and have a look at what everybody else is doing. I'll be popping into the group as well, so we can chat a little bit and say hi. People post updates. People are also really helpful in there. So if there's tips or tricks or ways of doing things that perhaps you haven't done before, often people will share theirs as they work through. So it's a really lovely space and community if you want a little bit more crochet along in between our videos each week. I will meet you back here next week for week 2 and the next installment of our Easter egg crochet along.